Hey guys, this is Ramon from Modern. I hope you guys are having a great day. As always, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Today I wanted to give my year-long review of the Canon EOS R. So when the EOS R first came out, it received kind of a ton of backlash, and this typically happens with Canon cameras. It happened with the 6D Mark II. I think it even happened with the 5D Mark III, and it's just one of those things. Tends to happen a lot with Canon, unfortunately. So Canon implemented several firmware features that just improved the EOS R by a mile. So when the EOS R first came out, it was priced aggressively around $2,400, around that price mark. A little bit higher than the Sony a7 III, which was a really popular camera. So the EOS R was competing with that in terms of specs and in terms of price. And setting this price point that aggressively caused a lot of consumers to just go with the a7 III just because the a7 III had a lot more to offer. Once Canon dropped the price and implemented a ton of firmware features, it made the EOS R a lot more appealing to a lot of its user base. I think as of right now, the EOS R can be had for about $1,800. On the used market, you're going to see it around maybe $1,500 to $1,600. And now with the EOS R5 and EOS R6, that price is going to come further down, especially in time for the holidays. It's going to be priced a little bit lower than the competition and a little bit more affordable for entry-level people to get in on the EOS R platform. So what do I love about the EOS R? For one, the swivel screen, the fully articulated swivel screen. Canon has always had this as a staple for its cameras, for implementing the swivel screen, and it's just very useful to use. So Canon was really at the forefront of implementing this fully articulated screen, and now we're seeing a lot more camera manufacturers start implementing the same flip out screen. So Fuji starting to implement it in their cameras. Sony with the a7S III started implementing with that flip out screen, and even with some of their ASPC line of camera. And I know a lot of old school photographers don't like the fully articulated screen. Honestly, a lot more people are vlogging these days. Vlogging has now reached the level where people on LinkedIn, people in business are starting to do it a lot more. So this makes it really appealing to just be a really useful feature for people to use. And this fully articulated screen was something I really wish the old 5D series from Canon had implemented. But since the EOS R has the same sensor as a 5D, it's just like having a 5D that's actually mirrorless and that actually has a fully articulated screen. So another positive that I like about the EOS R is that it's weather sealing. So Canon has always been known as doing fantastic weather sealing in its cameras, particularly with the full frame offerings that it has, and even the higher end mid-range cameras like the 80D, the 90D, and the 70D. They always make the weather sealing kind of a priority when it comes to these cameras. I had an a7 III prior to the EOS R, and weather sealing was really bad on that camera. If you took it to a dusty environment, it would, you would surely enough would get dust into that camera. So not having to worry about that with the EOS R was really great. I also like how Canon implemented a dust protective shield in the EOS R, which makes changing your lens out in the field, it just gives you that little bit of relief when you're trying to change lenses and you're not going to affect the sensor of the camera. So with the EOS R, you're getting a new mount, the RF mount, which means a new line of lenses. However, they did come out with their own Canon branded adapter where you could adapt old EF mount to the EOS R. One of the Canon EF adapters is an ND adapter, so you could add an ND filter. And the great thing about having this ND filter is that it's just one size of an ND filter that you could implement instead of having to have maybe 6 or 7 lens-specific ND filters. It's really helpful. Ultimately, I would have loved for them to have like a built-in ND filter into the camera, because eventually the RF lenses are going to overtake the EF lenses, and there's not an ND adapter built specifically for the RF lenses. So it would have been great if they had a built-in ND filter. I think that would have just solved a lot of problems that a lot of camera users use when they're using ND filters, but I'm sure that's going to be something later down the product line. Another joy and positive to this camera, the aerodynamics, it definitely feels like you're holding a real camera body, and you got kind of a nice little grip into the when you're using the camera. I just love how they designed the whole EOS R camera body. Silent shooting has been another plus and feature that they added to this camera, and in that the silent shooting in this camera is something where you could just go and select silent shooting for each of the modes in the camera. In the past, for other camera bodies like the EOS RP and the M50, the Canon M50, other mirrorless offerings that Canon has put out, they made the silent shooting a scene selection mode, which was just horribly implemented. But with the EOS R, it's something that you could just select in the menu, and you could have it available for almost all of your camera modes. Another feature that everyone has wanted with Canon to be implemented in a majority of their cameras is 4K recording. There's 4K in this camera that records at 24 frames per second. The drawback in that 4K recording is that it's going to have a 1.6 crop, which is just makes you really not want to use it sometimes, but 4K is better than nothing. And one of the last positives that I really love about this camera is or any camera, is the huge lens selection that you're getting when you're using the EOS R or the EOS R line of cameras. Not only do you have access to the new RF line of lenses, but if you were an EF lens user, you have access to several of those lenses as well. So it really gives you a whole lot of flexibility when you're choosing a lens for this platform. Now, on to some of the things that I do not like about this camera. As I've mentioned before about the 4K recording in this camera, it's going to be cropped at 1.6. That's something I really don't like, and I feel is really a drawback when you're trying to do a kind of a hybrid type of shooting from photo to video. It's just always having to think about that 1.6 crop. If you don't mind it, then it's fine, but it's still kind of annoying, especially when you think that the new line of EOS R cameras like the R6 and the R5, they have much less of a crop in them. You also lose dual pixel autofocus when you're shooting in the 4K mode. Another con for this camera is that it doesn't have embodied image stabilization. It does have digital image stabilization, which again is something that is better than nothing. I'd rather it be in the camera than not be in the camera. But if you are looking for a camera bodies that do have in-body image stabilization, you're probably going to be better off going with the EOS R6 and EOS R5. Another drawback to the EOS R was the high price point when it originally came out. It's still kind of hovering at a high price point, about $1,800 right now. It's still kind of high. Again, I think that's going to be something that drops in the next couple of months, just because of the competition with a lot better cameras, and there's just more competition out there. So another negative for this camera that a lot of people have talked about is the one SD card slot, which means that you don't really have a backup if you're out on a professional shoot. This just makes it really incredibly difficult to have a fail-safe in case your card fails when you're out there in a live photo shoot, and maybe you might lose something particularly valuable to the shoot that you were doing. Another issue that I had with the EOS R was that time-lapse is only available in the movie mode. It's not available in the photo mode. I point this out because time-lapse was available in the 5D Mark IV, but for some reason Canon did not implement it in the photo side for the EOS R. And I think that's kind of strange. I can't wait to try out the R6 and R5 to see if that's also the similar, or if that's just something that they wanted to hold off for their higher end cameras, which is weird because I think the EOS R is pretty much high end. And another drawback for the video side, in my opinion, I felt like the video coming from the EOS R felt a little soft when it came to the video image. It feels a little, you're not getting something as sharp or as crisp as something from a Sony, a Fuji, or the GH line of Panasonic cameras. So the last negative I want to talk about for this camera is the multifunctional mode dial on the back of the camera. And this is something that I rarely use. In fact, there are times where I just flat out turn it off. Honestly, Canon should have just implemented a real light button that has like a tactile feel to it instead of this bar, which kind of feels like they're trying to be this hybrid between a phone and a camera by implementing this thing into the back of the camera, and it didn't really make sense. The interesting thing is that for the EOS R6 and EOS R5, they totally got rid of this multifunctional dial that they implemented. So I guess it was just one of those things that they just wanted to try out. I would have liked them to try it out on some of the camera, but it was innovative at the time. It just didn't really work. And honestly, the amount of time you try to spend learning how to use this multifunctional tool, you'd just be better off by setting a custom button to some other button that actually feels like a button rather than that weird tool that they implemented. So another drawback that I want to discuss about the EOS R is the ability for the camera to lock focus. So what I've found is that the EOS R has a lot of difficulty struggling to track its subjects. So for stationary portraits, the EOS R does fine, but when it comes to trying to keep up if the subject is just moving, it's gonna fail, and you'll definitely miss some shots. It sounds like the R6 and R5 have kind of corrected those type of failures when it comes to tracking subjects. So to wrap up, I think the EOS R is definitely a great backup camera if you're a Canon shooter. If you're new to the whole Canon platform, or if you're upgrading from the 5D Mark IV or other cameras below that, like the 5D or the 6D Mark II, I would say you probably want to skip this one and maybe go to the R6 or the R5. The reason why I say that is that those cameras seem like they've corrected a bunch of things, a bunch of the problems that were found in the EOS R, and the R6, R5 seem a lot more defendable than the EOS R. Obviously the R6 and R5 have other issues that they're dealing with, like the overheating, but in terms of photo cameras, I think those are great cameras. The EOS R, I think, is better as kind of a backup camera in case things go wrong. So that's it for today's episode. If you have any questions about the EOS R, please leave them in the comments below, or anything that I might have missed. I would definitely love to know. So finally, thank you guys for watching this episode. As always, please like, subscribe, and share the channel. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.